Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a truly fascinating biological mystery. If you're a focused learner who loves understanding the mechanics of the mind, well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to explore the fluid, ever-changing nature of childhood attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. For decades, scientists and doctors have basically just watched as this developmental condition shifts and transforms as kids grow into teenagers and young adults. But, why does it change? What is actually happening inside the brain? Let's dive right in and uncover the physical brain signatures that dictate exactly how this condition evolves. To truly understand why all of this matters, we first need to grasp the sheer scale of the situation. 5%. That is the massive percentage of children and adolescents worldwide who are affected by ADHD. So we're not talking about some rare anomaly here. It's a super common developmental condition that touches literally millions of families, classrooms, and communities across the globe. And because it affects so many, it leads to the single most agonizing question that parents, patients, and doctors have to face. Will these symptoms fade, persist, or get worse? This unpredictability is our central mystery today. See, some people carry these symptoms right into adulthood. Others experience what's called a remitting phase, where the behavioral issues largely just fade away. And then there's a third path, an emergent path, where behavioral issues actually get worse over time. Predicting which kid will follow which path has historically been incredibly difficult. Section 1. Synaptic pruning explained, trimming the brain for efficiency. So to solve this mystery, we first need to look at the massive physical changes happening in the adolescent brain. Specifically, we need to understand a concept called synaptic pruning. Think of it like trimming the brain for efficiency. During adolescence, the brain goes through intense structural changes, naturally eliminating unused neural connections to make your mental processing faster and sharper. This totally normal trimming process causes the outer layer of the brain, the cerebral cortex, to literally thin over time. And here is the absolutely crucial point. Variations in exactly how quickly or slowly this thinning occurs can fundamentally alter how a person processes information, pays attention, and regulates their emotions later in life. To connect this physical pruning to ADHD behaviors, researchers needed data, and I mean a lot of data. An international team of scientists, led by Qiang Luo at Fudan University, turned to the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. It's this massive, ongoing project over in the United States. They focused on a really diverse group of 7,436 youth, starting right when they were roughly 10 years old. They took baseline brain scans and then tracked their behavior over 2 full years. Based on those behavioral assessments, they were able to separate the adolescents into distinct groups: a healthy control group, a persistent group, an emergent group, and a remitting group. Section 2. 3 unique brain signatures, mapping behaviors to brain structures. All right, with the youth categorized, researchers looked back at the brain scans to basically line up our biological suspects, and the results are pretty stark. Each behavioral group, persistent, emergent, and remitting, has a drastically different physical brain signature compared to the healthy controls. They aren't just behaving differently, their brains are physically developing at completely different rates in completely different regions. Let's break each one down to understand the why behind the behavior. First up, the persistent path. These are the youths whose high symptoms stayed high over the entire 2 years. Well, the scans revealed that this group exhibited a much faster rate of cortical thinning in certain frontal areas of the brain. The frontal regions are basically the control centers for executive functions, things like complex decision-making and cognitive control. Because this area thinned out way too quickly or abnormally, it directly links to deficits in those daily cognitive abilities, making it so much harder to maintain focus or control impulses. Next, let's move to the emergent path and see how this builds our understanding. These are the kids whose symptoms started low but actually worsened into clinical levels over time. Their brain scans showed a slower rates of cortical thinning in the right posterior cingulate cortex. Now, this region is a key part of the brain's default mode network, which regulates internal thoughts and mind wandering. Because this area thinned too slowly, meaning it actively retained connections that normally should have been pruned away, the brain actively struggles to shift focus outward. You can imagine how tough it becomes to stop mind wandering and pay attention to a teacher in a classroom when your brain is physically holding on to those internal connections. Finally, we have the remitting group, where the symptoms successfully faded away. They displayed a completely different biological signature, a faster physical volume expansion of the left hippocampus. The hippocampus is a deeper, primitive brain structure heavily involved in memory formation and emotion regulation. As this specific region grew faster, these adolescents showed massive behavioral improvements in school engagement, pro-social behaviors, and even sleep quality. And what's truly fascinating here is when researchers checked spatial gene expression databases, they found this specific brain growth strongly overlaps with genes responsible for managing dopamine and serotonin. I mean, we are literally watching genetic activity play out in the physical growth of the brain. Section 3, an unexpected medication twist, the long-term treatment discovery. So, if the brain's physical development dictates the symptoms, what happens when we introduce medical treatments? The researchers matched adolescents with similar initial symptom severity who either did or did not receive prescribed medication. Now, standard ADHD medications are highly effective at immediate symptom management. They help kids get through their daily lives, which is absolutely vital. But here is the twist. Taking prescribed medication was not statistically significant in predicting an individual's eventual entry into that remitting fading trajectory. The medication manages the daily behavioral symptoms beautifully, it really does, but it doesn't appear to fundamentally alter the underlying long-term physical development paths of the brain we just discussed. In fact, even those whose symptoms remitted still showed some persistent sleep and emotional regulation issues. Section 4. Predicting future symptoms, machine learning, and non-pharmacological hope. Okay, this brings us to the most exciting part of our explainer. If we know these physical brain signatures exist, can we actually use them to look into the future? Well, the researchers tested this in 3 steps. First, they inputted the baseline brain scans and behavioral scores of the 10-year-olds. Second, they fed this data into a really sophisticated machine learning computer model. And third, the model accurately predicted the symptom severity of those exact same participants 3 years later at age 13. Let that sink in for a second. Using physical brain measurements significantly improved the accuracy of forecasting a child's future behavior, going way beyond what simple behavioral checklists could do on their own. And to ensure this wasn't just some fluke in a single dataset, they rigorously validated it. Tracing this timeline, they started with baseline scans at age 10. They proved the predictive model worked at age 13, but then they took the model to completely separate, independent clinical samples. This included a European neuroscience study of young adults aged 23, and they successfully replicated the exact same link between hippocampal expansion and fading symptoms in these adults. Observing this identical physical brain pattern across different age groups strongly bolsters the reliability of this incredible biological discovery. Now, as focused learners, we always have to step back and look at the full picture. Science is a fluid, ongoing process, right? And this study published in Nature Mental Health definitely has limitations we need to acknowledge. First, the data is observational. That means we can't definitively prove that these brain changes directly cause the symptom changes. We just know there is a very strong correlation. Second, because they use different data sets to validate the findings, the questionnaires used to measure behaviors varied slightly, which makes exact one-to-one comparisons a bit complicated. Finally, the information regarding complete long-term medication dosing histories was somewhat limited, relying a bit on parental reports, so researchers really caution against drawing totally definitive conclusions about long-term drug impacts just yet. But the roadmap has been drawn. We now have a tangible biological target. And that brings us to a final, incredibly provocative thought. We know from other areas of neuroscience that certain lifestyle interventions, like consistent aerobic exercise, can naturally influence continuous growth in the hippocampus. So, the crucial point is this. If a physically growing hippocampus is the biological signature of fading ADHD symptoms, and if aerobic exercise naturally grows that exact same brain region, could the future of targeted, long-lasting ADHD treatment start outside the pharmacy? It is an empowering, truly fascinating question to leave you with today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep staying curious.